Thunder's growl echoed from deep within the abandoned warehouse. Rex Sullivan stopped cold, reading the tension in his German shepherd hackles raised, ears pinned back. 20 meters ahead, under the single flickering light, a figure lay motionless in a torn police uniform. Fresh blood scented the air, but Rex didn't dare approach. Too quiet. No guards anywhere. Rex raised his hand slightly, trying to catch the officer's attention without making noise. Her lips moved with difficulty. They took the children. Military instincts screamed in his head. This is a trap. The single father who just wanted to walk his dog had stumbled into something that would force him to face the hardest choice of his life. The evening had started ordinary enough. Rex Sullivan punched out from the Morrison construction site at 7:45, his shoulders aching from 12 hours of concrete work in the October heat. The overtime pay would cover Chloe's birthday party next month, maybe even leave enough for that purple bike she'd been circling in the Walmart catalog for 3 weeks straight. 8 years old and already developing expensive tastes, just like her mother had. Rex pushed that thought away as he climbed into his battered Ford pickup. The truck had 200,000 miles on it and a transmission that slipped in 3rd gear. But it got him to work and back home to his daughter. That was all that mattered these days. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, chasing some wine country dream in Northern California with a man who owned a boutique hotel. She called Chloe on birthdays and Christmas, sent postcards with generic messages about missing her, and mailed child support checks that arrived sporadically, usually 2 weeks late. Rex had stopped being angry about it 18 months ago. Anger took energy he didn't have to spare, and Chloe needed every ounce of attention he could give her. She was the reason he got up at 5:30 every morning, the reason he worked doubles on weekends, the reason he'd turned down 3 different job offers in other states. Home was wherever Chloe was, and Chloe was here. Their apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a building that had been old when Rex was born. The elevator worked when it felt like it. The neighbors upstairs practiced salsa dancing until midnight on weekdays, and the rent consumed 42% of his income. But the lease was month to month. The superintendent fixed things when they broke, and most importantly, it was walking distance to Chloe's elementary school. She could ride her current bike to the corner store for milk when they ran out, and the neighborhood was safe enough that Rex didn't worry about her playing in the courtyard after school. Thunder met him at the apartment door with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for soldiers returning from combat deployments. The German Shepherd had been Chloe's choice 3 years ago during their visit to the county animal shelter. "He looks sad, Daddy," she'd said, pointing at the scarred dog cowering in the back corner of kennel number 7. "Just like we were after Mommy left." Rex had signed the adoption papers 20 minutes later, partly because Chloe's logic was unassailable, mostly because the dog's eyes held the same hollow grief he saw in his own mirror every morning. Best $150 he'd ever spent. Thunder had adapted to their small family with remarkable intelligence. He walked Chloe to school every morning, waiting patiently while she said goodbye to her friends. He slept on the floor beside her bed, one ear always tuned for sounds that didn't belong. When Chloe had nightmares about her mother not coming back, Thunder would rest his massive head on her pillow until she fell asleep again. The dog understood pack dynamics instinctively, and their pack of 3 had become unbreakable. Except tonight, their pack was down to 2. Chloe was spending the week with Rex's sister Jennifer in Denver while he worked a series of double shifts to bank overtime pay before the construction season ended. Jennifer had 2 kids of her own, and insisted she loved having Chloe around for sleepovers and shopping trips. Rex appreciated the help, but the apartment felt hollow without his daughter's constant chatter filling the rooms. Even Thunder seemed off balance, spending long minutes staring at Chloe's closed bedroom door as if he could will her back through sheer concentration. "She'll be home Sunday," Rex told the dog, scratching behind Thunder's ears. Just 4 more days. Thunder's response was to pace restlessly through the apartment, stopping occasionally to sniff Chloe's abandoned sneakers by the front door. The dog missed her almost as much as Rex did, which was saying something. Rex heated a frozen dinner in the microwave and ate standing up in the kitchen, checking his phone for text messages from Jennifer. 3 photos from their day at the Denver Zoo, showing Chloe grinning beside various animals. His daughter looked happy and relaxed, surrounded by cousins who adored her. Rex saved each photo to his phone's memory, adding them to a collection that now numbered in the thousands. By 8:30, Rex had finished his dinner, paid 3 bills online, and started a load of laundry. The evening stretched ahead with nothing to fill it except television shows he didn't care about and the kind of restless energy that came from working physical labor all day. Thunder was pacing again, pausing at the door to fix Rex with meaningful stares. "You want to go out?" Rex asked, and the dog's immediate response answered his question. Rex grabbed Thunder's leash from its hook beside the door, along with a jacket that had seen better years. October in the Pacific Northwest meant temperatures could drop 20 degrees after sunset, and tonight felt like one of those nights when autumn reminded everyone that winter was coming. They descended 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was making grinding noises that suggested expensive repairs in the near future. Thunder bounded ahead, then waited patiently while Rex locked the building's front door behind them. The neighborhood was quiet for a Tuesday night, with most families already settled in for the evening. Porch lights glowed warmly behind drawn curtains, and Rex caught glimpses of ordinary domestic scenes, families eating late dinners, children doing homework at kitchen tables, couples watching television together on comfortable couches. Rex envied those families sometimes, though he tried not to dwell on it. He and Chloe had built something good together, something that worked despite its imperfections. They didn't need anyone else to be happy. At least that's what he told himself during the quiet moments when loneliness crept in around the edges. Thunder pulled towards the south side of downtown, away from the residential neighborhoods and into the industrial district, where warehouses and loading docks lined the streets like sleeping giants. Rex preferred walking there because Thunder could run off leash without bothering anyone, and the wide-open spaces gave them both room to stretch their legs after being cooped up all day. Tonight felt different, though. The air held a tension that made the hair on Rex's arms stand up, an electricity that reminded him of pre-storm weather in Afghanistan, when the atmosphere itself seemed to hold its breath. Thunder sensed it too, his ears swiveling constantly to track sounds Rex couldn't hear. They'd walked these streets hundreds of times over the past 3 years, but tonight Thunder kept pulling towards the old shipping district, the section that had been mostly abandoned since the port moved operations 5 miles north to accommodate larger container ships. "What's gotten into you, boy?" Rex muttered, but he followed the dog's lead. 7 years in the army had taught him to trust unusual behavior from 4-legged partners. Military working dogs had saved his life more than once by detecting threats human senses missed completely. If Thunder wanted to investigate something, Rex was inclined to let him. The warehouse complex ahead housed remnants of the city's industrial past. Most of the buildings had been empty for years, waiting for demolition crews or developers with enough capital to renovate them into trendy loft apartments. A few still showed signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks in the gravel, cigarette butts that hadn't yet been scattered by wind and rain. But most stood silent and dark, slowly surrendering to rust and neglect. Thunder stopped abruptly beside a chain-link fence that surrounded the largest warehouse in the complex. The dog's entire body went rigid, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to release. Rex followed Thunder's gaze toward a gap between buildings, where pale yellow light leaked into the darkness like spilled paint. Someone was inside one of the supposedly abandoned warehouses, and Thunder's posture suggested they had no business being there. Rex's hand moved instinctively toward his phone, ready to call for police assistance. Then he heard the voice weak, female, desperate. A single word repeated like a prayer. Help. Military training kicked in before civilian caution could stop him. Rex had spent 7 years as an army medic. 7 years learning to move toward trouble instead of away from it. The instinct to help wounded people had been burned into his nervous system by countless emergencies in forward operating bases across Afghanistan. When someone called for medical assistance, you went. Everything else was secondary. Rex approached the warehouse complex with careful steps, keeping to shadows while Thunder flanked him, like they'd practiced this maneuver 1,000 times before. The massive sliding door of the main warehouse stood partially open, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. Pale light spilled from the opening, creating a rectangle of visibility against the surrounding darkness. Rex paused at the threshold, every nerve in his body screaming warnings. Something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong. Police officers didn't end up alone and injured in abandoned warehouses without backup, without ambulances, without crime scene tape. Either this was the freshest crime scene in history, or someone wanted it to appear that way. Rex studied the interior through the gap in the door. A single industrial bulb hung from a cable 20 feet above the floor, casting harsh shadows across what had once been a loading dock area. Conveyor belts ran along one wall, their metal framework creating a maze of potential hiding spots. Stacks of wooden pallets provided additional cover near the far wall. In the center of the illuminated area, directly beneath the hanging bulb, a figure in a police uniform lay motionless on the concrete floor. Blood had pooled around the person's torso, dark and thick under the artificial light. Rex could see the rise and fall of labored breathing, the occasional movement of arms and legs that indicated consciousness. Whoever this was, they were alive, but in serious condition. Thunder pressed against Rex's leg, a low whine escaping his throat. The dog's message was crystal clear. Danger surrounded them like an invisible net, ready to close at any moment. Rex made his decision. He slipped through the door opening, Thunder at his side, both of them moving with the careful precision they'd developed during 3 years of evening walks through questionable neighborhoods. Each footstep echoed off the metal walls despite Rex's efforts to move silently. The warehouse was enormous, designed to accommodate multiple shipping trucks simultaneously, and sound carried differently in such large spaces. As they drew closer to the injured person, details became clearer. The figure was a woman, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair matted with blood and perspiration. Her police uniform looked authentic, proper insignia. Correct badge placement, regulation equipment belt. But something about the fabric seemed wrong. too clean, too new, as if it had been purchased recently rather than worn regularly. "Thank God," she whispered as Rex knelt beside her. "I thought no one would come." Rex's hands moved automatically, checking pulse points and assessing wounds the way he'd done hundreds of times in military field hospitals. Rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, 2 apparent gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. She'd lost significant blood, but remained conscious and coherent, positive signs that suggested her injuries, while serious, weren't immediately fatal. "What's your name, officer?" Rex asked, keeping his voice low and steady. "Casey Martinez, Detective Narcotics Division." Her words came in broken fragments, each one clearly causing physical pain. "Undercover assignment. They found out." "Who found out?" Casey's eyes darted toward the darkness at the rear of the warehouse, where Rex could make out the shapes of additional machinery and storage areas. "Trafficking operation. Human trafficking. They're holding children, kids locked up in shipping containers behind this building." Rex's blood turned to ice. Human trafficking wasn't just another crime category. It was an industry built on the systematic destruction of innocent lives. Children stolen from families, sold like commodities, transported like cargo. If Casey was telling the truth, somewhere nearby were kids who desperately needed help. "How many children?" Rex asked. "6 that I counted for certain. Maybe more in other locations." Casey's hand fumbled weakly in her jacket pocket, eventually producing a small digital recording device no bigger than a matchbook. "Evidence. Everything's recorded on here. Conversations, financial transactions, locations." The device was still running, its tiny red LED blinking steadily in the dim light. Whatever was captured on that recorder had nearly cost Casey her life and might be the only evidence capable of stopping a criminal organization. "Where exactly are they keeping the children?" "Red shipping container, north side of this building, heavy padlock on the door. They move the kids every few days to avoid detection." Thunder's growl filled the warehouse, low and threatening. The dog was staring fixedly at something in the darkness beyond the loading dock area, his entire body coiled with tension. Rex had learned to trust Thunder's instincts completely, and right now those instincts were screaming danger. Rex spun around just as the first figure stepped into the circle of light. The man who emerged from the shadows looked like someone's idea of an ideal police commander. Silver hair perfectly styled, strong jawline, expensive suit visible beneath a tactical vest that had seen actual use. He moved with the controlled confidence of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room he entered. His eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who'd been hunting for years. 2 additional men followed him into the light, younger, harder, with the kind of dead stare that suggested they'd crossed lines most people wouldn't even approach. All 3 carried weapons with practiced familiarity, handling their pistols like natural extensions of their hands. "Detective Martinez," the leader said, his voice carrying easily across the warehouse despite its conversational tone. "I specifically told you what would happen if you attempted to record our business discussions." Casey's hand tightened protectively around the recording device. "Captain Morrison." Rex felt puzzle pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Morrison, as in Morrison Construction Company, where Rex had been employed for the past 2 years, where his immediate supervisor had specifically recommended this neighborhood for late-night dog walks because nobody ever bothers you out in the warehouse district, where overtime schedules had been arranged to ensure Rex would be working alone during evening hours all week long, The trap hadn't been set for Detective Martinez. It had been carefully constructed for him. "Mr. Rex Sullivan," Morrison continued, and Rex wasn't surprised the man knew his full name. "Staff Sergeant, Army Medic, 3 tours in Afghanistan, expert marksmanship qualification, advanced hand-to-hand combat training. Currently employed as a concrete worker, single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Chloe." Morrison nodded toward one of his companions, who produced a tablet computer and activated its screen. The display showed a high-resolution photograph of Chloe and Jennifer shopping in a Denver mall, clearly taken earlier that same day. His daughter was laughing at something her cousin had said, completely unaware that dangerous men were documenting her every movement. "Beautiful child," Morrison observed. 8 years old, 4th grade at Riverside Elementary, loves horses and ice cream, and that insufferable pop music all the children listen to these days. Currently staying with your sister Jennifer at 214 Maple Street in Denver. Lovely neighborhood, very family-friendly. The threat was delivered with calm precision. No dramatic posturing or raised voices. Morrison was stating facts, outlining consequences, explaining the situation with the detached professionalism of someone who'd done this many times before. These weren't desperate criminals or street-level drug dealers. They were organized professionals with resources, connections, and the demonstrated ability to reach Rex's family anywhere in the country. "What exactly do you want from me?" Rex asked. "Something very simple," Morrison replied. "Detective Martinez is going to have a tragic accident tonight. Her unauthorized investigation into our business operations will die with her. The recording device she's carrying will disappear, and you're going to help make all of that happen. And if I refuse?" Morrison's smile contained no warmth whatsoever. "Then Chloe and Jennifer experience their own tragic accident. Automobile crashes happen every day, Mr. Sullivan, even to the most careful drivers. Gas leaks in residential homes are unfortunately common. Random street crime has increased dramatically in Denver recently." Rex looked down at Casey, who was struggling to remain conscious despite her injuries. The recording device in her blood-stained hand represented evidence of serious crimes, possibly the only evidence capable of bringing down Morrison's entire organization. If she died here tonight, those children locked in shipping containers would disappear completely into the trafficking pipeline, sold to the highest bidders, and transported to locations where they'd never be found. But if Rex fought back against Morrison's men, Chloe would pay the ultimate price for his decision. "I need a few minutes to think this through," Rex said carefully. "Of course," Morrison replied with mock generosity. "Take all the time you require. We're not in any particular hurry." Rex's eyes swept the warehouse methodically, cataloguing potential weapons and defensive positions while appearing to consider Morrison's offer. Ancient conveyor belt machinery ran along the eastern wall, their metal framework creating natural cover and concealment. Stacks of wooden shipping pallets near the loading dock provided additional protection from gunfire. Close to where Casey lay bleeding, someone had abandoned maintenance equipment when the warehouse closed, including a 3-foot length of iron pipe that looked sturdy enough to serve as an improvised weapon. Thunder remained perfectly motionless beside Rex, but he could feel the dog's coiled tension. The German shepherd was waiting for a command, ready to transform from family pet to combat animal at a moment's notice. Rex had never trained Thunder for military operations, but the dog possessed natural protective instincts that could be devastating if properly directed. "Mr. Sullivan," Morrison continued conversationally, I should mention that we have surveillance teams positioned outside your sister's residence in Denver. Any attempt to contact Jennifer or warn her about this situation will result in immediate and permanent consequences for both her and Chloe. Rex nodded slowly, projecting the demeanor of a man accepting inevitable defeat. But his mind was already working through tactical possibilities, calculating angles and distances and timing. Morrison was making the classic mistake of overconfident commanders throughout military history, assuming victory before the actual battle was concluded. "There's something you should understand about me," Rex said, taking a subtle half-step closer to the abandoned iron pipe. "And what might that be?" "I really hate people who hurt children." Rex dove for the iron pipe as Morrison's men raised their weapons in response to his sudden movement. Thunder launched himself at the nearest gunman with a snarl that echoed off the warehouse's metal walls like rolling thunder. The space erupted into complete chaos as 3 different conflicts began simultaneously. Rex rolled behind the conveyor belt framework as bullets sparked off metal surfaces around him. The iron pipe felt reassuringly solid in his hands, heavy enough to inflict serious damage, but light enough for quick, precise movements. It wasn't much against 3 armed professionals, but combined with superior knowledge of the terrain and a highly motivated canine partner, it might be enough. Thunder had driven his initial target to the concrete floor, and the man's screams suggested the dog was winning that particular engagement decisively. 1 threat temporarily neutralized, 2 remaining and actively dangerous. Rex peered carefully around the edge of the conveyor belt, trying to track Morrison and the remaining gunman. They'd taken defensive positions behind the wooden shipping pallets, attempting to coordinate a flanking movement that would catch Rex in crossfire from multiple angles. Classic small-unit tactics, executed with professional competence. But they were fighting in an environment Rex had been studying and analyzing since the moment he walked through the warehouse door. Every shadow, every piece of cover, every potential weapon or tool had been catalogued in his memory. The overhead lighting created deep pools of darkness between the conveyor belts, and Rex used those shadows now, moving from position to position while the gunmen tried unsuccessfully to track his location. He could hear Morrison giving quiet orders, coordinating the flanking movement with hand signals and whispered commands. Professional, organized, experienced. But Rex had significant advantages they weren't aware of. 7 years of urban combat in Afghanistan had taught him to use any environment as a weapon, to turn defensive positions into offensive opportunities. The stack of industrial chemical drums near the far wall caught his attention. Cleaning solvents and degreasers, judging by the hazard warning labels. Definitely flammable, probably toxic. Not ideal as weapons, but useful for creating distractions or forcing enemy movement. Rex made his move during a brief pause in the gunfire, sprinting from the conveyor belt toward the chemical storage area. Bullets followed his path, but the poor lighting and multiple shadows made accurate shooting nearly impossible for Morrison's men. He reached the chemical drums, just as Morrison rounded the conveyor belt with his pistol raised and ready. For a long moment, they stared at each other across 20 feet of open concrete floor, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. "End of the line, Sullivan," Morrison said with cold satisfaction. Rex smiled grimly and kicked over the nearest drum with all his strength. Industrial solvent spread across the concrete in a rapidly expanding pool, its vapor creating an invisible but toxic cloud between Rex and Morrison. The smell was overwhelming, sharp, acidic, dangerous to breathe in the enclosed warehouse environment. Chemical vapors rose from the spill like heat mirages, distorting vision and making accurate shooting virtually impossible. Morrison fired twice into the chemical cloud, but the rounds went wide as the vapors interfered with his ability to track Rex's movement. Rex was already repositioning, using the chemical spill as concealment while he worked his way around to Morrison's flank. The third gunman appeared from behind the shipping pallets, weapon trained on Rex's last known position. But Thunder had finished neutralizing his first opponent and attacked the second man from his blind spot, driving him face first into the concrete floor with devastating force. That left Morrison isolated and without backup. Rex emerged from the chemical vapors like a ghost, iron pipe raised and ready to strike. Morrison spun toward him, trying desperately to bring his pistol to bear, but Rex was too close and moving too fast for effective response. The pipe connected with Morrison's wrist, and his weapon went skittering across the warehouse floor. Morrison was tough and well-trained, but Rex had 40 pounds of muscle and 7 years of military combat experience on his side. The fight ended quickly and decisively. Rex secured Morrison with electrical cord he'd found near the maintenance equipment, then applied the same treatment to the other 2 men. Thunder stood guard over all 3 prisoners, occasionally growling when one of them moved more than the dog considered appropriate. Casey was still conscious but fading rapidly when Rex returned to her side. He applied pressure to her wounds while speed-dialing 911 on his cell phone, giving the emergency dispatcher precise coordinates and a detailed situation report that would bring medical assistance as quickly as possible. "Detective Martinez," Rex said urgently, "I need to know exactly where those children are being held." Casey's voice was barely above a whisper. "Red shipping container. North side of this building. They use heavy-duty padlocks, but the hinges are old." Rex looked toward Thunder, who was already moving purposefully towards the warehouse's rear exit. The dog had understood every word of the conversation and was ready to continue their mission. They found the shipping container exactly where Casey had indicated, sitting among a collection of similar containers in what had once been the warehouse complex's main storage yard. The padlock was indeed heavy-duty military surplus, but Rex had brought the iron pipe from inside the building. It took several minutes of determined effort and considerable noise, but eventually the lock mechanism gave way under repeated impacts. The container door swung open with a metallic screech that seemed impossibly loud in the night air. Rex's flashlight beam revealed 6 children huddled together in the darkness. 4 girls and 2 boys, ranging in age from perhaps 7 years old to early teens. They were dirty, frightened, and clearly hadn't received adequate food or medical care in some time. But they were alive, conscious, and responsive. "It's okay," Rex said softly, holding his hands up so the children could see he wasn't carrying weapons. "I'm here to help you. My name is Rex, and I'm going to get all of you home safely." The children responded gradually to the calm certainty in his voice and non-threatening body language. They began moving toward him slowly at first, then with growing confidence as they realized their ordeal was ending. Thunder approached with the gentle demeanor he used around Chloe, allowing the children to pet him, while Rex conducted quick medical assessments. Most appeared physically unharmed beyond malnutrition and dehydration. The psychological trauma would require professional intervention, but they'd survived their captivity with remarkable resilience. By the time the first police units arrived, Rex had all 6 children sitting safely in the warehouse parking lot, wrapped in his jacket, and sharing water from bottles he'd found in his truck. Casey Martinez was conscious and providing preliminary statements to paramedics. Morrison and his associates were secured and waiting for transport to detention facilities. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Hayes took command of the crime scene, coordinating with federal agents who arrived within 40 minutes. The human trafficking investigation had been ongoing for 8 months, and tonight's arrests represented the breakthrough law enforcement had been desperately seeking. "Mr. Sullivan," Lieutenant Hayes said, approaching Rex with obvious respect and admiration. "What you accomplished tonight. There simply aren't adequate words to express our gratitude." Rex shrugged, watching paramedics carefully load Casey into the ambulance. "Anyone in my position would have done exactly the same thing." "No," Hayes said firmly. "Most people would have called 911 and waited for backup to arrive. You entered that warehouse knowing it was an elaborate trap, knowing you were outgunned and outnumbered because a police officer was dying and children were in immediate danger. I'm just a construction worker who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." "You're significantly more than that," Hayes replied, "and I believe you're beginning to understand that about yourself." 3 weeks later, Rex sat in his apartment's small kitchen, reading newspaper coverage of the trafficking arrests, while Chloe worked on homework at the table beside him. Morrison's criminal organization had been dismantled completely, with operations in 7 different states shut down, and more than 40 children returned to their families. The recording device Casey had risked her life to protect contained enough evidence to ensure the entire leadership would spend decades behind bars. Casey herself was recovering ahead of medical expectations. She'd called Rex twice during her hospital stay to check on his well-being and provide updates on the ongoing investigation. The 6 children they'd rescued together were all receiving comprehensive counseling and medical care. Most would return to their families within the month, though some would require foster placement while social services worked to reunite them with relatives. Rex's phone rang, interrupting his reading. The caller identification showed a number he didn't recognize, but something about it seemed vaguely familiar. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Hayes. We spoke extensively at the warehouse crime scene." "I remember you, Detective. How can I help you this evening?" "We have a developing situation in the downtown area. Missing persons case involving a 16-year-old girl who disappeared from her high school 3 days ago. We have reason to believe she was taken by associates of Morrison's organization who managed to avoid arrest." Rex set down his newspaper, his attention immediately focused on Hayes's words. Across the table, Chloe looked up from her math homework with curious eyes. "What exactly do you need from me?" Rex asked. "We need someone with your particular combination of skills and experience. Someone who understands how these criminal organizations think and operate. Someone who's proven they can handle themselves effectively in dangerous situations involving child victims." Rex looked across the room at Thunder, who was lying in his favorite spot beside the apartment's single window. The dog's ears had perked up at the mention of danger and missing children, and his eyes held the same alert intelligence they'd displayed in the warehouse. "This wouldn't be an official police operation," Hayes continued carefully. "More of a consultation arrangement. But if you're interested in helping us locate this girl—" Rex thought about Chloe, safely home from her week in Denver, and currently struggling with multiplication problems that seemed far more important than they actually were. His daughter had peppered him with questions about the adventure she'd read about in local newspapers, treating him like some kind of action hero from her favorite movies. Rex had tried consistently to downplay his role in the events, but Chloe possessed an 8-year-old's ability to see through adult modesty. "Daddy," she'd said just the previous evening while they were washing dishes together. "You saved those kids because that's the kind of person you are. You help people who can't help themselves. Sometimes children understood things better than adults ever could." "Detective Hayes," Rex said after a moment of consideration, "when would you need me to start?" Thunder's tail began wagging enthusiastically, as if the dog understood they were about to embark on another mission together. Rex reached down to scratch behind the German shepherd's ears and found himself smiling despite the serious nature of Hayes's request. Some men were born to build things with their hands, others were born to fix whatever was broken in the world around them, and some, Rex was beginning to understand, were born to stand as shields between innocent people and those who would do them harm. The phone call could wait until morning for a final answer, but as Rex looked out his apartment window at the city lights stretching towards the horizon, he already knew what his response would be. There were more children out there who needed help, more families torn apart by criminals who believed money and power made them untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. Thunder stretched and yawned, then padded over to check on Chloe's progress with her homework. The dog's nightly routine involved making sure every member of his pack was safe and accounted for before settling down for sleep. Rex understood that protective instinct completely. Protecting your family was the most important responsibility in the world. But sometimes, he was learning, protecting your own family meant protecting everyone else's family as well. He folded the newspaper and reached for his phone to call Detective Hayes back. There was important work to be done, and somewhere in the city, a teenage girl was waiting for someone to come find her and bring her home. Outside their apartment window, the evening train rumbled past on elevated tracks, its metal wheels grinding against steel rails with a sound that reminded Rex of conveyor belts and warehouse machinery. Thunder's ears flicked towards the noise, and for just a moment the dog's muscles tensed as if remembering recent danger. Chloe looked up from her homework, pencil poised over a math problem. "Daddy, you okay?" Rex watched his daughter's face in the warm kitchen light, 8 years old, trusting, safe. The train's sound faded into the distance, but its echo seemed to linger in the apartment's quiet corners. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, reaching over to check her multiplication tables. "Everything's fine." But Thunder remained alert by the window, watching the darkness beyond the glass. And Rex knew that some sounds, once heard, never really went away.